When we're inspecting plumbing systems that have galvanized supply and distribution piping, we want to look for indicators that tell us that it may be reaching the end of its normal lifespan. Now, we factor in the age of the home that we're looking at, and we compare that to what we're seeing with the piping. Most of the galvanized that we look at is generally going to be older. We're not seeing a lot of galvanized put in as new distribution piping. It's usually in older homes. The house that I'm looking at now, it was built in 1940, and we have some indicators here that show that this piping is nearing the end of its life expectancy, and I want to take you through and show you what those indicators are. Now, we're going to follow the piping back. This is where it enters into the house. That is the main supply pipe, and that is galvanized coming out through the ground, and then it comes up. So we've got our supply coming this direction. We go to here. This is our main water shutoff. Now we've got a little bit of a stretch of copper in that section, but then it branches, and it does two things. So we branch to the left, and that goes to the galvanized. We'll talk about that. It branches to the right, and they've switched over. They've already replaced this with CPVC. We start looking at this galvanized pipe, and one of the things that we want to look at are the fittings. We want to look to see if there are rust marks, indicators of rust on the fittings, on the couplings themselves, and you can see there that coupling has got a lot of rust on it. You come over, here's another one. We've got a lot of rust on this coupling. We've got rust and possibly an active leak on this coupling. So we're starting to see the rust form on different spots. Now you're going to see several areas. Notice that they've switched over to copper and PEX. So somebody has been installing a new bathroom. There was another new fixture that was installed. So when they ran that new fixture, or the supply for that new fixture, they ran PEX. But B, they've also replaced some sections too. They've went ahead and replaced that CPVC that was going over. That's already been replaced. Now here's a good example of what happens to the inside of galvanized pipe as it starts to age. See if I can get a good shot of that. Take a look inside of that pipe. There we go. Take a look inside, and you see that the pipe started out at a certain diameter, but as it's rusted and corroded, it's closed up the pipe. So what started out maybe as a pipe that was, let's say, this big, as it rusts and corrodes, it will actually close up. And now water volume, we can't get as much volume through because there's not as much diameter with the pipe. That's one of the other things that you'll see with galvanized. You'll see that you turn on one or two fixtures and you'll get a reduction in water flow. We could at one point maybe get 8 gallons a minute through our supply pipe. Well, if that supply pipe is now closed up, we may be only able to get 3 gallons a minute. And so when we start turning on one or two fixtures, we'll notice that the flow goes down on those fixtures. So mainly when we have galvanized piping, we're going to look for rust on the surface of the pipe because we know that's actually breaking through. It's corroded and rusted through the wall of the pipe, especially on the fittings. We're going to look for leaks, obviously, and we're also going to look for a reduction in flow. So when we turn on fixtures, we may see flow go down because that pipe has corroded and closed up. Another thing that would also set us off to having galvanized piping prior to us verifying is when we turn on maybe a bathtub and you see a lot of rust come through if that bathtub hasn't been turned on for a while, or any plumbing fixture for that matter. But if you have a lot of rust coming through on the water supply side, that may be an indicator that galvanized is present, the inside walls have rusted, and some of that rust has got in the water. Now that can usually be flushed out for the most part when you operate the plumbing or operate the fixtures for a few minutes, but that tells me as an inspector that galvanized is present, and it's one of those indicators that we're starting to get rust on those inside walls. So these are good examples of older galvanized piping. You get to see some piping that's been replaced because it's closed up, and you see some rust on some of these fittings too. Kind of gives you an example of what you're going to see as galvanized piping starts to age.